Welcome. This video is documenting the prediction that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on November 27th, 2025, Thanksgiving Day. And it is predicted that the news of this will be first reported on November 28th, 2025, Black Friday. The post date on the social media platform that you are watching this video on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. The next 18 minutes of this video is an introduction that I am placing at the beginning of about a dozen videos. This introduction regards the prophetic signs that occurred on October 30th and 31st, 2025. If you have already watched this introduction in another video, you can skip ahead no more than 18 minutes from this point of the video. All right, it is predicted that famous singer Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on November 27th, 2025, Thanksgiving Day, and it is predicted that the first news of this fall will be reported on November 28th, the following day, Black Friday. This email was composed, as we can see here, on November 15th, prior to these predictions for November 27th and 28th. Prior to October 30th and October 31st, 2025, it was predicted that Paul Simon would slip and fall and injure his head on October 30th, and it was predicted that the news of this would first be reported on October 31st. God orchestrated a myriad of connections from other prophetic signs in order to confirm this analysis for October 30th and 31st. In other words, these connections from the other prophetic signs were known in advance of October 30th and 31st to be pointing to October 30th and 31st. On October 30th and 31st, we received clear prophetic signs that are related to Paul Simon. October 30th and 31st was a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head, which is predicted to be on November 27th, 9 + 9 + 9 days after October 31st. First of all, God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, and the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is the number 9, as from the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. What do I mean by step in the trail of signs? Well, God's prophetic signs, none of them can be properly or fully understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs, something that is mostly missed by other people that are interested in God's signs. And this is also why the vast majority of God's signs are completely unknown and missed and are only being talked about on this channel. The reason why God does this is He is able to tell stories through the big picture of signs and interconnected signs that He wouldn't otherwise be able to tell from one single prophetic sign isolated on its own. That's why these signs are not recognized in general by other so-called watchers, and the signs that are recognized are not fully appreciated or understood. The reason why God tells these stories is in order to communicate extremely important information and knowledge that everyone needs to know, that is only being communicated or explained, I should say, on this channel. And for example, there was a tremendous theme that God was using for October 30th and 31st, Halloween, that God didn't, I assume, I can gather, want to use for the final date of Paul Simon's fall and then death. These signs and this theme of Halloween are extremely important, and you will see what I'm talking about when you watch these other videos, including probably this video, because what I'm doing right now is making an introduction to these other videos that predicted October 30th and 31st. In other words, there are about 10 other videos that must be watched, every minute of them. And when the prediction comes to pass, the wise person will recognize that they do need to watch every minute of every video on this channel. When the prediction comes to pass that Paul Simon will fall and hit his head and injure his head on November 27th, and it being reported on November 28th, it will prove all of the analysis for October 30th and 31st, 9 plus 9 plus 9 days ahead of the predicted fall. And the reason why that's important is because this will prove all of the information in these other 10 videos that God was telling through these stories that he designed to lead up to October 30th and 31st. He didn't do this for any reason at all. He did this for extremely important reasons. And so that's the purpose of a step in the trail of signs. It further paints the picture and enables God to tell these stories. And these stories could not be possibly told without these steps that served to connect the other prophetic signs in the big picture web of God's signs. Believe me, I know far better than anyone the purpose for this prediction that is from God. And it is to prove the things that I am saying in these videos, and especially the controversial things that I am saying, which will be proven to be true because they are proven beyond a doubt through God's big picture of signs, which in turn will be proven to be true when this prediction comes to pass. And so hopefully I have made it clear why God did this for October 30th and 31st. In other words, what I'm about to explain in the next couple of minutes is an explanation for the prophetic signs that occurred on October 31st and 30th, and which are these dates that we expected such signs in advance of these dates. And when the prediction comes to pass on November 27th, it will prove that October 30th and 31st were indeed steps in the trail of signs, and therefore all of the analysis for October 30th and 31st that was explained in advance of these dates is 100% correct. To not appreciate this is to miss entirely the point of this prediction that is from God, the point of this video, and the point of the videos on this channel. You might as well turn this video off. If you do not appreciate this, you are wasting your time. Okay, so that's what's going on here. So that's, again, why it is that this video must be watched, and the rest of this video will talk about how God pointed to October 30th and 31st ahead of time, and now you understand why he did this and why it is important that you learn what God did to point to these dates ahead of time. Because what God did to point to these dates ahead of time are the stories that contain the knowledge that you need to know. On October 30th and 31st, we received clear prophetic signs that are related to Paul Simon, as we expected in advance of these dates. October 30th and 31st was a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date it is predicted Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head, which is predicted to be on November 27th, 9 plus 9 plus 9 days after October 31st. Elvis Presley famously covered Simon's Bridge Over Troubled Water song, and Presley died from the effects of his fall in his mansion when he hit his head on a porcelain bathtub. Most people don't know this, but professionals believe that the true reason for Elvis Presley's death was not him taking drugs, but the drugs were taken to deal with the side effects from the severe head injury he had 10 years earlier in 1967, when he fell in his bathroom and hit his head on his porcelain bathtub and was unconscious for an unknown period of time. This, in turn, caused over the years increasingly severe autoimmune diseases as a result of the brain injury. And that's all related to, guess you know what? The Thing, and we will talk about that in these videos. The thing that causes autoimmune diseases. Now, Paul Simon's best-selling album is titled Graceland. His song Graceland is about his journey with his young son to visit the King of Rock, Elvis Presley, the King of Rock and Roll's mansion, Graceland Mansion, in the 4x4th state. Memphis, Tennessee is named after Memphis, Egypt, and Memphis, Tennessee is located in the area of the country that is nicknamed Little Egypt. Elvis Presley, incidentally, has a hit song named Little Egypt from his 9th soundtrack album, no less. The King of Rock's Graceland Mansion in Memphis is symbolic, and I say that because of the 4x4th state and the number 9, and I'm getting ahead of myself here because God pairs 9 and 44 together. So hold on a second. The King of Rock's Graceland Mansion in Memphis is symbolic of the King of Egypt's palace. And in the Bible, the King of Egypt is a type for the Antichrist king. The Antichrist king, who will reside in the White House mansion that has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, and is located at 4x400 Pennsylvania Avenue. This Antichrist king is the 44th president, and he was inaugurated in the year 09. This is why in his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, God pairs the numbers 9 and 44 together. On October 30th, King Charles, and by the way, in the Bible, the Israelites escaped the persecution from the King of the King of Egypt, and likewise the Pilgrims escaped the persecution from the King of England, which is King Charles. On October 30th, King Charles formally stripped, and Paul Simon sang about the Pilgrims in his song American Tune. On October 30th, King Charles formally, this date that we knew in advance to relate to Paul Simon, who God is using to point to the King of Rock and Roll. Okay, so on October 30th, King Charles formally stripped Prince Andrew of his royal titles. One of the main stories on October 31st, the following day, was the question of what would become of Prince Andrew's mansion. And also on this day, news broke that Prince Andrew had hired 40 prostitutes in 4 days while he was in the royal kingdom of Thailand. 40 prostitutes in 4 days hints at the number 44. In his signs, God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 to confirm his signs and connections. And by the way, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which he would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9, 23, and 44. And I know these are the numbers because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. Okay, and so the reason for 23 and 44 is because the 44th president was the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school basketball. And also the thing alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes, the mark of the Antichrist. The 44th president is the Antichrist. So in his signs, God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 together to confirm his signs and connections. The news of Prince Andrew's 40 prostitutes in 4 days in the Royal Kingdom of Thailand was exactly 2 times 300 days after Prince William and Prince Harry visited the King of Rock's Graceland estate and mansion in the 4 times 4th state. And again, the news on this day was Prince Andrew's mansion. And exactly 2,300, or 2 times 300, I should say, days prior, the princes visited the King's Graceland mansion in the 4 times 4th state. That's a pairing of 23 and 44. Furthermore, it pairs with the 40 prostitutes in 4 days at the other end of this timeline. Okay, now this 2 times 300 days is the equivalent of exactly 4,200 days. And in Bible prophecy, the period of the Antichrist king's rule is symbolized by 42 months. Also, on October 31st, Trump, God's trumpet for prophetic signs, trumpeted that he had renovated the Lincoln bathroom in the White House mansion that has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms and is located at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. President Lincoln was the 4 times 4th president. Also, on October 31st, Trump had an interview in his mansion in the 9 plus 9 plus 9th state, Florida, with CBS for the first time since his $4 times $4 million lawsuit with this news company. That's another pairing of 9 and 44. The 9 plus 9 plus 9th state and the $4 times $4 million lawsuit. These signs on October 31st that hinted at the number 44, again, the 40 prostitutes in 4 days, and the Lincoln bathroom named after the 4 times 4th president in the White House mansion, which has 44 plus 44 rooms and is located at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. Okay, these signs on October 31st that hinted at the number 44, including the sign in Trump's mansion in the 9 plus 9 plus 9th state, are 9 plus 9 plus 9 days before Simon is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head in his house or mansion, if you will, on Thanksgiving on November 27th, 2025. The 4 times 4th president formally began the tradition of celebrating Thanksgiving on the 4th Thursday of the month of November. November is Latin for 9. The renovation of the bathroom in the White House mansion that is named after the 4 times 4th president hints at how Elvis died in his bathroom in his Graceland mansion from the effects of the fall that he had in his bathroom in his mansion years earlier. Likewise, Simon, who sang about the Graceland mansion, is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head and ultimately die from his head injury. Okay, I should also add that the Graceland mansion is in the 4 times 4th state. And so the renovation in the bathroom of the White House mansion that is named after the 4 times 4th president hints at how Elvis died in his bathroom in the Graceland mansion in the 4 times 4th state from the effects of the fall he had in his bathroom in his mansion years earlier. Likewise, Simon, who sang about the Graceland mansion, is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head like Elvis did and ultimately die from his head injury. Also on October 31st, Trump, God's trumpet, trumpeted that the U.S. is considering conducting a military raid in support of the persecuted Christians in Nigeria, Africa. Simon's Graceland album was controversial because he visited South Africa during apartheid and he used South African musical influences in his songs on the album. One of the released singles from the album is Under African Skies. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall to the ground and seriously injure his head on October 31st, 2025. He will die as a result of the head injury, but it is not certain on what date that will be. It could be on October 31st, but it could be later. And it is also predicted that Michelle Obama will become the Queen of America, the president, on January 20th, 2029. The date that this video was posted on the social media platform you are watching it on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, before October 31st. Also, this email that is timestamped and this forensic notes PDF document prove that this prediction is being made ahead of time. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will fall and hit his head hard on October 31st, 2025. It is predicted that he will die as a result of this fall, although it's not certain on what date he will die. It could be on October 31st, but more than likely it'll be at a later date. But anyway, he's predicted to slip and fall on October 31st. He, of course, has a big hit named Slip, Slidin' Away. So this email documents this prediction as being made ahead of time. As we can see here, this email was composed on October 11th. Okay, if you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward this to you. Now, in this video, I will talk about, like usual, many different prophetic signs and how they come together in a big picture of signs, which is really only, well, the true big picture of God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is only being explained on this channel. And that's one reason being is because it's not really recognized elsewhere that the full intended meaning of God's prophetic signs, none of them, can be fully or properly understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs, which is also why the vast majority of the prophetic signs in general are missed by the other people that are watching for prophetic signs. And so, for example, the death of Diane Keaton, as I'll demonstrate, is, among many other things, pointing to the predicted fall of Paul Simon and later his death. So let's get into what I wrote here. Prior to October 11th, 2025, it was recognized that it would be a very important date in God's signs. So this date was known ahead of time. This is the date that Diane Keaton died, by the way. But it was known quite a bit beforehand that this would be very important, this date. This is because October 11th, 2025, one reason is that it was exactly 17 times 17 months after two planes struck two towers 17 minutes apart. Why did the two planes strike the two towers 17 minutes apart? Well, because the two space shuttle disasters, which were also aviation explosions, right, in the sky, these two disasters, because the towers were exploded, the planes exploded into the towers way high up in the sky. The two space shuttle disasters were almost exactly 17 years apart. They are commemorated on the same date every year because they were essentially on the same day, 17 years apart. Well, why were the two space shuttle disasters 17 years apart? Well, that hints at Apollo 17 in the Apollo moon missions. The first Apollo mission to land on the moon was Apollo 11. The last one was Apollo 17. 11 and 17 hint at a number of things, including Zechariah 11:17, which describes the Antichrist, but also H1117 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word Bama, proper noun, capital B, which instead Obama. And the word Bama means, in the Hebrew, high place. And that's because Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. The word lightning in Hebrew is barak. The word Bama is high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven. For example, it is said that Lucifer fell from the high place. And also the high place is a euphemism in the Bible for the false religious worship that the Jews would conduct on the tops of mountains, the high places. And the word for from in Aramaic, the language Jesus would have spoken, is O. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, even though he knew it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And so anyone that says that the identity of the Antichrist cannot be known until some supposed vague thing happens that they're not even quite clear on, are incorrect. In fact, the truth is, the vast majority of God's prophetic signs have been for the purpose of revealing the identity of the Antichrist, including Apollo 11 and Apollo 17, because they landed on the high place, the moon. But this hints at the Antichrist, but the moon symbolizes Christ, which is more confirmation that the Apollo 11 and 17 hint at Obama, the president of the US and NASA, formerly, and will be soon again in the future, in 2029, is the Antichrist. Okay, so anyway, back to what I was saying. The moon symbolizes Christ because the moon is a giant rock, and rock in the Bible is symbolic of Jesus. And the sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at. The sun symbolizes God the Father, but the sun's light can be gazed at through its reflection off of the moon. This is why in the Bible, watching for the timing of the moon is important and is symbolic of watching for the timing of the Lord's return through, for example, watching moon signs. The last time that an American was on the moon and departed from the moon is symbolic of America's departure from Christ, which I've explained many other times in other videos. So I hesitate to get into anything more than just that, because I'm already way off track here for this first paragraph. So, okay. So that's why the two planes struck the two towers 17 minutes apart. But anyway, this October 11th, 2025 date was exactly 17 times 17 months after the big date, which is about the two 17s, the two planes in 17 minutes apart. And also the second tower, which was 17 minutes after the first one, was the second witness, which is very important because after the first plane hit the first tower, the world watched live and in horror, I should say watched live and in confusion as to whether it was an accident or terrorism. But then 17 minutes later, the second witness happened, which confirmed that it was terrorism and therefore a judgment warning from God. In the Bible, it says that two witnesses are required to confirm a matter. So it was recognized that October 11th, 2025 would be important also because it was recognized that this date was 17 plus 17 days. After the 19th prime number of shipping containers fell off of the cargo ship in Los Angeles, the ship named Mississippi. It was also recognized on October 11th, that October 11th would be 9 plus 11 days before the predicted fall of Paul Simon, who will slip and fall and injure his head. Now, the 17 plus 17 days to the 19th prime number of shipping containers off the ship in Los Angeles hints at the planes that were destined to Los Angeles on 9/11, when the two planes struck the two towers 17 minutes apart. That's why 17 plus 17, and also the 19th prime number hints at 9/11. But they were on their way to Los Angeles, which is why the containers fell off the ship in Los Angeles. Mississippi, because Paul Simon sang in the first lyric of his big famous song, Graceland, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. Now, I'll be jumping ahead. I'll cover this more in a minute. But the Mississippi Delta refers, or prophetically, is a reference to the Delta brainwaves that will facilitate mass demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, which will be through frequencies, and music is frequencies, which is why Paul Simon, the musician, sang about the Mississippi Delta shining like a national guitar. Now, Paul Simon famously dated Shelley Duvall and famously broke up with her at the airport, as in the portal that the demonic demons will pass through to possess people, before she caught a flight to the UK to film the movie The Shining, which is why the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. These demons will promise immortality through the mark of the Antichrist, the SHOT, the thing, which is what puts the things inside people's brains that will facilitate the demonic possession with the 5G frequencies. But but speaking of The Shining, and the Mississippi Delta was shining, there's also the reference to shining in arguably the Beatles, well, not arguably, arguably the most famous alternative, arguably the first alternative music pop hit in history, Tomorrow Never Dies. When John Lennon talks about, it is not dying, it is shining. Okay, so he talks about immortality and shining there, and that's what will be promised from these demons that will pretend to be aliens and offer the SHOT, the mark of the Antichrist. But make no mistake, the thing that was taken a couple of years ago is also the mark of the Antichrist, and has put the things in people's brains that will cause the shining, the demonic possession of these people. And the movie The Shining is about demonic possession and about a large hotel, which is possessed. But that is symbolism for a mansion, and Paul Simon sings the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar as he was traveling to the Graceland mansion. Okay, so on October 11, 2025, Diane Keaton, the actress in the movie Annie Hall, died. Hall is another reference to mansion, symbolism for it. By the way, Diane Keaton's maiden name is Hall, and Diane hints at Annie. So it's clear to me that Woody Allen got the name for Annie Hall from Diane Keaton's name. But anyway, that's not neither here nor there. Coincidentally, I mentioned Annie Hall is the video recording I made yesterday. I'm talking to friends when I write here. So I mentioned it because Paul Simon met Shelley Duvall on the set of Annie Hall. So this ties us again to Paul Simon. Okay, we have, oh, and by the way, all of these connections to 9/11 is pointing to Paul Simon, because Paul Simon is symbolism for 9/11. The big thing after 9/11 in 2001 was the first broadcast of Saturday Night Live from New York City, Manhattan. 4 days later, when Paul Simon opened the broadcast, the first broadcast after 9/11, and performed the boxer. Boxing is about knocking a person in the head, attempting to get them to fall down to the ground, which is what is predicted to happen to Paul Simon. He's predicted to fall to the ground and injure his head. which is in itself symbolism for 9/11, because the planes at the towers, at the top of the towers, and the head is on the top of a person's body, right? And then they fell. The towers fell. Also, Paul Simon performed at the 10th anniversary of 9/11 at the memorial. Anyway, that's actually 5 plus 5 years, and that's actually also relevant because Graceland, Memphis, is on the I-55, which connects New Orleans, which he traveled down in the song Graceland, but it also connects Memphis and New Orleans to the home of the Antichrist, Chicago. And it also passes through St. Louis, which God is using for the gateway arch as symbolism for a portal through which the demons will pass through into the earthly realm and demonically possess people. Through 5G frequencies, as described in the 5th trumpet of the book of Revelation, which is another reason for the I-55 highway connection. So back to what I was saying here, though, this Annie Hall connects not only through hall and mansion symbolism to Paul Simon, but Annie Hall is a movie that Paul Simon was in, as well as Shelley Duvall, and that's where they met. And so that's why Diane Keaton died on this date that's pointing to the date that Paul Simon will die, as I'm explaining right here, because this date, October 11th, which pointed to 9/11, as I explained in the first paragraph, is 9 plus 11 days to Simon's predicted fall on October 31st. Now, this not only hints at 9/11, but also Revelation 9:11 is the verse, the passage in the Bible that God is using to symbolize all of this, the demonic possession of those who take the mark of the Antichrist. The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. Now, Paul Simon performed The Boxer 4 days after 9/11, and that's because the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a symbol for a door. And it is the door in Revelation, the 5th trumpet, symbolized by Revelation 9:11, that is opened with a key, after which the demons demonically possess people for 5 months. The 5th trumpet, 5 months, another 55 for you there. Oh, and the name or word Satan is mentioned 55 times in the Bible as well. As is, I think, the word demon, come to think of it. Now, speaking of 4 days after 9/11, on 9/11, the 4th plane that crashed killed 44 people in a 40-acre pit because the airplane crashed at a 40-degree angle, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, as in the bottomless pit that will be opened with the door and the key through which the demons will pass through. And by the way, Paul Simon was born in 41, and the word key is 41 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. And the demonic possession will be facilitated by the 5G frequencies. Music is frequencies. And in the Bible, Paul refers to Satan as the prince of the power of the air, which is why the symbolism in the airplanes that crashed and Shelley Duvall being broken up with Paul Simon at the airport, and music and frequencies that travel through the air in order to demonically possess people. October 11th, 2025 was 17 times 17 months exactly after 9/11. The movie is known for the movie Annie Hall, that is known for contrasting movie sets in New York City and Los Angeles, which hints at the two planes 17 minutes apart in New York City on 9/11 that were destined for Los Angeles. In the movie, Diane Keaton and Woody Allen's characters fly on a plane from New York City to Los Angeles, just like the planes on 9/11. So this also hints at 9/11. And again, this date was known ahead of time. Okay, so Diane Keaton starred in many movies, but there's only one that she won the Oscar for Best Actress for Annie Hall, which is the movie many people say to be Woody Allen's best movie also. So this isn't just any movie. This is like the movie that Diane Keaton is known for, right? And by the way, it was at the beginning of her career too. So I think it was her breakout role as well. So this is her movie, if you will. And again, this October 11th date was known ahead of time because of these connections to 9/11, like I've explained. But now I'm saying or showing how, well, the movie, furthermore, takes place in New York City. But also, it's known, you can read this on Wikipedia, the movie is known for contrasting sets in New York City and Los Angeles. Okay, because it takes place in both cities, but also in the movie, they fly in a plane from New York City to Los Angeles, which hints at the planes on 9/11 that were destined for Los Angeles, before they are hijacked and flown into buildings in New York City. In the movie, like I just said, okay, so they fly in a plane to Los Angeles. This is at 9/11. Okay, now again, well, I say it right here. So okay, this movie Annie Hall, it cost $4 million and made $44 million. That's straight from Wikipedia. Okay, you can see that for yourself. The movie won 4 Academy Awards. That's nuts. Well, why is this? Because it's exactly what I'm talking about in this video. That Paul Simon is symbolism for the door that's opened to the bottomless pit, because the 4th letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door. And this judgment in the 5th trumpet follows the period or the sound of silence at the beginning of Revelation chapter 8. Which is, of course, a hint at Paul Simon, whose first hit that launched his career was Sound of Silence. And Paul Simon recently said in an interview on the Colbert Show that he thinks that the song that has a chance to be remembered 100 years from now would be the Sound of Silence. So that's like his biggest song. It's also his first song. It's also, for sure, the most famous song in the world, like in other countries, right? Outside of the US, the most recognized Paul Simon song, one of the most recognized songs of all time, is Sound of Silence, right? So anyway, what we have here, Paul Simon again sang on 9/11, 4 days after 9/11. And the movie here that I'm saying hints at 9/11 cost $4 million and made $44 million and won 4 Academy Awards. And on 9/11, the 4th plane killed 44 people in a 40-acre pit because the plane crashed at a 40-degree angle, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, 4 days before Paul Simon sang The Boxer to open the Saturday Night Live broadcast. Flight 93, this flight that killed 44 people, the 4th plane, was destined for San Francisco, which hints at the Antichrist, Pope Francis, the 266th Pope. Diane Keaton also starred in Something's Gotta Give, which made $266 million. This is prophetic, something's gotta give. In other words, the transgressions has exceeded the tolerable limit. Because another reason why Paul Simon is symbolic for number 4, or rather 4 symbolizes all of this, is because of the Hebrew idiom that's repeated in the book of Amos for 3 transgressions and for 4. Paul Simon's first album with Garfunkel was Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Wednesday's the 4th day of the week. 3 a.m. is the 4th watch in ancient Israel. So that's a 3 and a 4. The first album came after they were signed by the first agent to sign them, Wally Amos, the founder of famous Amos cookies, which hints at the prophet Amos, in which this Hebrew idiom repeats. Simon, by the way, is Jewish. And so the meaning of the idiom means the tolerable limit of sin or transgressions has been exceeded, and now judgment and destruction is unavoidable. This is why Paul Simon's death will be symbolism for the bookend to the warning that was given to America on 9/11. Because again, Paul Simon is a 9/11 sign, and his death will be the symbolic end of that grace period of warning, and now judgment and destruction of the nation is unavoidable. That's what will be communicated when Paul Simon dies. It's that serious. There are many people, Christians, that are talking about a supposed revival and the salvation of America before it's doomed. No, I'm sorry, but God has been communicating this for many years. America was not destined to repent, and now the time is up, which is why the album of Simon and Garfunkel's named Bookends, which is the fourth Simon and Garfunkel album. Do you see? Simon sang 4 days after 9/11, the beginning of the bookends to the period of warning for America to repent and turn back to God. Since then, it has not turned back to God. It has raced exponentially even further away. And now Simon's death will be the other bookend, which is the name of their fourth album. In case you're wondering why I said that Pope Francis is the Antichrist, even though he's dead, this is because he will be resurrected in the 4th month of 2029. Anyway, that's another subject. But he will be resurrected by the demons that will emerge from the bottomless pit, that will pretend to be aliens for the deceived who think that there's a possibility that aliens could possibly exist. But no true quote-unquote Christian would think such a thing, even the possibility. In fact, if someone who is claiming to be a quote-unquote Christian is open-minded to the possibility of there being aliens, and I'm not saying that person believes they're aliens, but is even open-minded to the possibility of there being aliens, that person is not a Christian. Well, they don't have a Christian worldview anyway. Of course, Christianity is more than just having a particular worldview. But in Christianity, it is impossible for there to be aliens, and that's why demons will pretend to be aliens. It's to fool people that don't have a biblical worldview, including, especially, because the target is these people, the quote-unquote Christians that aren't really Christian, to try to pull them away. And that's what the end times is for. It's a test of faith. It's a separating of the sheep from the goats, the black and the white. And there's a lot of gray. But the end times will serve to further make the dark darker and the light lighter. So, for example, when I said that America was or has raced exponentially further away, at that same time, the light has been growing brighter in contrast, and is and has been, especially in recent years, standing up and fighting more, fighting back, not going along with the plan, and in the process getting canceled, etc., and censored. Well, let's move on. So, October 11th was 17 plus 17 days after the 19th prime number of shipping containers fell off the cargo ship in Los Angeles named Mississippi. Okay, Paul Simon sang about the Mississippi in the song Graceland on the album Graceland. Paul Simon opened the first broadcast after Saturday Night Live. Paul Simon opened the first broadcast of Saturday Night Live after 9/11. Annie Hall was first screened in Los Angeles on March 27th, 1977. The 19th prime number of days after the date 119 in 1977, which hints at 9/11, which, by the way, included Flight 77, when Simon sang American Tune at Carter's pre-inaugural ball. American Tune makes references to Apollo 11 and the Mayflower ship, which arrived on the date 11/11 with 101 passengers after the 11th triangular number of days at sea, which was notable because it took way longer than it was supposed to because of a huge storm, and that blew them way off track, which caused them to land in Massachusetts instead of Virginia, where they were destined. But had they gone to Virginia, they wouldn't have survived because of the native population. But the native population had coincidentally been devastated 2 years prior to their arrival due to disease. And so they were able to get into the abandoned, cleared land, etc., at the beginning of winter, which they desperately needed. Well, anyway, so it was all destined by God, in other words. And speaking of Paul Simon, his name Paul and Simon hints at Simon Peter, the two main fishers of men, one for the Gentiles, one for the Jews. And that's why Paul Simon married Carrie Fisher, for example, famously. But also, that's why the Mayflower, which he sings about in American Tune, the song, got hooked because of the storm into Cape Cod. Because if you look at the geography of Cape Cod, it's clearly a fishing hook. Because this is a big important step in the age of fishing for men. Because God used America as a disciple of Christian disciples to spread the gospel around the world. Jesus said he wouldn't, in the 19th and 20th centuries, Jesus said he wouldn't return until the gospel had spread around the world, which America and the other English-speaking nations were instrumental in doing, which is why God blessed these nations. But now these nations are at the top of the pile in terms of the coming judgment, or that's unfolding as we can see. These nations are currently in the process of being destroyed, as is obvious to those that aren't completely sick and brainwashed. In other words, the secular left. That is facilitating the destruction of these countries. So this pairs with the 19th prime number of days to hint at Flight 11, with its crew of 11 that flew into the towers that looked like a giant 11 on 9/11. So let me get back here. So we have October 11th, which was the 19th prime number of days after the cargo ship. 17 plus 17 days, which is 9/11 symbolism, after the 19th prime number of shipping containers, which is also 9/11 symbolism, that fell off the ship in Los Angeles, which is also 9/11 symbolism. It's a transportation vehicle, a cargo ship, and the planes were destined for Los Angeles. Okay, it's hints at Paul Simon because the ship was named Mississippi, and Paul Simon, as I've explained now, sang after 9/11, and so is symbolism for 9/11. And the movie Annie Hall, starring Diane Keaton, had the actress's death on October 11th, and so that's also 9/11 symbolism, the movie Annie Hall. Well, anyway, here we have the movie released the 19th prime number of days after this date that hints at 9/11, when Simon sang to the nation and to the president at the pre-inaugural ball about the Mayflower and Apollo 11. And the Mayflower is filled with a bunch of 11s, right? Because it landed on the date 11/11 in the calendar with 101 passengers, which hints at 9/11, hints at 11. And it was in the and it was after the 11th triangular number of days. Well, on 9/11, it was Flight 11 with a crew of 11 people that flew into the Twin Towers. It looked like a giant 11 in New York State, the 11th state, and New York City is made up of 11 letters. This is because Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, which in ancient Israel referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness, and in English is an idiom that means last chance. Time is running out, as in last chance for America to repent and turn back to God. The flights, including Flight 11, that departed Boston, departed from Governor's Island, which is where Logan Airport is located. Governor's Island is named after the first governor of Massachusetts, John Winthrop, who led the 11-ship flotilla, which was the next arrival after the Mayflower. And then before they disembarked their ships, delivered a sermon that was derived from Deuteronomy chapter 28, which was given to the Jews by Moses before they crossed the Jordan into the Promised Land. The chapter is about God's promises of blessings or curses. The Pilgrims, the Puritans, saw their crossing of the Atlantic as analogous to the Israelites who escaped the persecution of the king of Egypt and then came across the Jordan into the Promised Land. Likewise, they escaped the kings of England's persecution and crossed the Atlantic into their Promised Land. And in Deuteronomy chapter 28, God speaks about 9/11. Because, for example, in the chapter, in the section regarding curses, because it's about blessings or curses, there is an eagle that swoops down on the Israelites. Well, on the plane, Flight 11, was a big eagle on the tail, and as the plane descended and swooped into the towers, it hinted at Deuteronomy chapter 28. Also, in Deuteronomy 28, in regards to curses, God speaks of the sky turning to bronze and people walking on iron, which is exactly what happened at Ground Zero. The sky was bronze orange, and people were walking on the debris of iron. The reason for the 11 here is not only the phrase Jesus coined, the 11th hour, but it's also symbolic of reflection. Because if God were to use a number to symbolize reflection, in other words, the reflection and contrast between blessings and curses, it would be the number 11, which is why Flight 11 departed from Governor's Island, which is where Winthrop lived, who delivered the speech at the founding of America, the spiritual founding of America. There are only two nations in the history of the world that were founded on a relationship with God in the Bible, Israel and America. Simon met Shelley Duvall on the movie set of the movie that has a scene in which the main characters travel on a plane from New York City to Los Angeles. This scene involving Diane Keaton. Simon and Duvall broke up at an airport in New York City before Duvall flew to the UK to film The Shining. Simon's Graceland begins with "The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar." I've already explained all of that already, so let's move on. Annie Hall won 4 of the 5 big awards. Okay, so there's what's known as the 5 big Academy Awards. Annie Hall won 4 of them. It was the 50th Academy Awards. The movie The Turning Point received the most nominations that year with 11 nominations. Keaton died the 11th prime number of days after the death of the founder of Turning Point USA. Do you see that? Diane Keaton won her Oscar, by the way, right? Which was one of these 4 Oscars at the 5th big awards, or one of the 4 that were one of the 5 big awards at the 50th Academy Awards. But the movie that year, The Turning Point, when she won her award, when Diane Keaton won her award, her only one, that same Academy Award ceremony, The Turning Point received the most nominations with 11 nominations. Diane Keaton died the 11th prime number of days after the death of the founder of Turning Point USA, which of course was a massive prophetic sign. For one thing, he died in the Four Corners state, and she won Annie Hall won 4 awards. Anyway, it's very relevant that he died in a four-corner state. That isn't just a thing that I pulled out of a hat. I'm not going to explain it here. Okay? He also was buried in another four corners state. But anyway, I've explained the significance of the number 4 already. The door, by the way, when the demons cross through the door, that will be a turning point and the beginning of the collision between the demonic realm and the earthly realm, which is predicted to be in early 2029. Now, on October 11th, 2025, it was announced that one of the horses that broke free, on the same day that Diane Keaton died, we have another thing that happened, another prophetic sign. Huge. On this day, which, by the way, connected with 9/11, it was announced that one of the horses that broke free and ran bloodied through the streets of London on April 24th, 2024, was retired. That was the announcement, on this day. It was symbolic of the horses of the apocalypse in the book of Revelation. Especially the fact that he was bloodied, running chaotically through the streets of London. Wow, that was a huge sign. Now, October 11th, 2025, like I said, was 17 times 17 months after 9/11, but it was also 17 months and 17 days after this date when the horses ran through the streets of London on April 24th, 2024. 17 months and 17 days is symbolic of two planes 17 minutes apart on 9/11, which hints at Revelation 9/11, which is the verse that symbolizes the demons crossing through the door and demonically possessing people. And the prince of the power of the airplanes on 9/11, etc. And that's why, again, the 44 deaths in the pit, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, the fourth plane, Now, this April 24th date, that was 17 months and 17 days before the horses retired, the day that the horses broke free and ran chaotically bloodied through the streets. On that same day that the horses ran bloodied through the streets of London was a Revelation 9/11 sign. Because on the day the horses broke free, Big Ben, the big famous clock in London, was stopped working at 9 a.m. 66 minutes after 9, the clock bonged 11 times. 66 is the 11th triangular number. The clock pointed to Revelation 9/11 on the day of the horses running free, which was also a Revelation prophetic sign, the four horses of the apocalypse. And the horse was retired on the day that Diane Keaton died, who won her Oscar when her movie won 4 of the Academy Awards, and that movie cost $4 million and made $44 million. So it does point or hint at the 4 horses of the apocalypse. Now, 66 also hints at 3 times 22, which hints at Genesis 3:22, the verse that God is using to symbolize the big lie at the end of the age, that will be the same lie that was at the beginning of the age when Satan told Eve in the garden that she shall surely not die, because the demons will promise immortality through the transhumanism SHOT thing, the mark of the Antichrist, which even a few years ago was transhumanism. It was the same technology. And again, Revelation 9:11 is the verse that symbolizes how those who take that thing will become demonically possessed, because it's a spiritual abomination and they've been marked. Their chromosomes have been altered, which is why it is a mark. They've been altered with what? That's right, snake venom, the symbol of evil in the Bible. That's right, the SHOT involves snake venom. That's what the protruding amino acid chain is. And you know what I'm talking about. Think about it. I can't say the word. It's the protruding amino acid chain that was characteristic of the disease, that was also used in the things, the SHOTs, right? And that has been inserted into people's chromosomes. That's why they're marked. And it is a spiritual abomination also because it uses cells from unborn babies. And it also, by taking it, gives power to the Antichrist beast system that compels other people to take it. And so it wasn't just unrighteous because you ruined your own body with it, but more importantly, you fed the system that compelled other people to take it. And that was extremely unrighteous. And like Bible prophecy says, those who have taken it will go to hell. And yes, I understand that the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken it. But also, nowhere in the Bible does it say that one cannot repent after having taken it, contrary to what some people assert, but doesn't say that anywhere. The name Keaton means Hawk's Town, or place of hawks. 6 plus 6 plus 6 days, the number of the Antichrist Bible prophecy, 666, 6 plus 6 plus 6 days before the death of Keaton, Hawk's Town. The famous skateboard belonging to the GOAT, greatest of all time of skateboarding, and God uses goats for signs, Tony Hawk, was auctioned off. The name of the skateboard is Birdhouse Falcon 2. It was used for his famous record-setting, quote-unquote, 900 trick. He landed at the X, as in Mark of the Antichrist, games in 99. 99 is 9 times 11, which hints at Revelation 9:11, which again is symbolic of the demonic possession of those who take the mark of the Antichrist, which is symbolized by an X. And the number 9 is the most important number in God's prophetic signs. It's from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. But this 900 trick was landed, was a record-setting trick, at the X Games in the 99 year, which is 9 times 11. The auction of the 900 skateboard was 17 days before the head of HHS, who is known to be a falconer, a birdman, was in the news for what the media called the Friday Night Massacre. Okay? The reason why RFK Jr. has an issue with his voice is because God is using RFK Jr. as his voice for truth. In fact, RFK Jr. and Trump are the two witnesses described in the book of Revelation, chapter 11. There's lots of proof for that, but when the prediction in this video comes to pass, it'll prove that, and all of the other controversial things that I am saying in this video, by the way. And believe me, I know far better than you or anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. And it is to prove the controversial things that I am saying. Case closed. End of debate, including what the thing is, and it being the mark of the Antichrist, including the thing that people already took. Right? No, it does not need an additional something to go with it, such as an additional technology or a false form of religious worship. In fact, for those who are wise, it did come with a false form of religious worship. And it does not need a supposed new age of dispensation after supposedly all quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. In fact, one of the main reasons why the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken it is that it is in fact judgment for this particular doctrine of dispensationalism, which is the package that free grace or cheap grace comes in other words, once saved, always saved, and its close cousin, Reformed theology, Calvinism, the package that sovereign grace comes in. And so, Jesus said regarding this Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, that he hates it and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth and those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. Well, okay, that aside, and for the commonly held objections that people have based on their understanding of Bible prophecy that tell them that this couldn't possibly be the thing, well, when the prediction comes to pass that Paul Simon will fall on October 31st, no, that you are incorrect. And for the commonly held objections that people have, I answer them in the must-watch snake bite video on this channel. Okay, now, the story here, okay, is about how Tony Hawk is being pointed to through Keaton, whose name means hawk, or place of hawks, or Hawk's Town, 6 + 6 + days before, okay, which is 666. But that's relevant because of what I'm explaining here, because it connects to RFK Jr. and because the skateboard, the skateboard is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, which in Bible prophecy is symbolized by 666. Okay, but furthermore, as a second witness to this 6 + 6 + 6 days, the connections between these two hawks is the connection to RFK Jr., who is God's voice for truth regarding the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing. By the way, RFK Jr. joined forces with Trump on the stage with pyrotechnic fire in the background, which is symbolic of the fire from heaven in Revelation 11 with the two witnesses. But anyway, on that day, RFK Jr. turned 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old, exactly 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days after Trump turned 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old on the first day of his inauguration in the year ending in 7, which was 73 days, which hints at 3 sets of 7 after he won the election by 77 electoral votes, which was exactly 73 weeks, which hints at 3 sets of 7 after he began everything with his descent down the golden escalator. And when Jehu, King Jehu in the Bible, was anointed, which is what Trump is, he's symbolic of Jehu in the Bible, he descended down the staircase, and that's why Trump descended down the escalator. Jehu's reign was for 28 years. Trump first ran for president in 2020, and that's why Trump's reign will end in 2028 with his predicted assassination. But that's another subject. Now, so here's the story, though. Okay, so again, 17 days after the 900 skateboard was auctioned. Well, why is that relevant? Because to get ahead here, the Antichrist was president from 09 until 17. But also it's 9/11 because the second plane with its crew of 9 people, the first plane had a crew of 11 people, and it was flight 11. The second plane with its crew of 9 hit 17 minutes later. 17 divided by 9 is equal to 1.88. Which is the number 188 that God uses frequently in his signs to point to the Strong's Concordance H188, the word for woe exclamation mark, used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. 9/11 was the first time in exactly 188 years after a foreign enemy attacked the nation's capital when the British landed at Washington's Mount Vernon estate before they then burned down the Capitol building and White House not before Dolly Madison famously rescued Washington's portrait. So that's why 900 plus 17 days, the skateboard 900 plus 17 days to the RFK Jr. And again, 9/11 is all about pointing to Revelation 9/11, which is about the mark of the Antichrist. So that's why from the 900 skateboard to RFK Jr. 17 days later. Now, what happened on that day? The news media reported the story as being titled in the headline, Friday Night Massacre. Why was it called a Friday Night Massacre? Well, what it was, first of all, was when the CDC is over was exclaimed by some guy who thinks he's important or the media says was important in the whole thing. But he said the CDC is over. RFK Jr. lays off 1,000 employees in Friday Night Massacre is the title or the headline, okay? Now, what this is a reference to, I've found out, is this event called the Saturday Night Live Massacre. Sorry. So, whoa, that's Paul Simon. Just came to me accidentally there. No wonder. Because as I'm explaining, it all points to Paul Simon, who is 9/11 symbolism through Saturday Night Live. It's funny how difficult that word Saturday is to say fast. I always stumble on it. I don't know why, if it's maybe my mouth and the way my mouth is designed, but I don't know if other people have the same problem. But Saturday, you have to really focus on the T there. Saturday Night Live. Okay, so Saturday Night Massacre. Well, what it was is this time when it was the turning point. in the Watergate scandal, okay? Which was the turning point in the Watergate scandal. This Saturday Night Massacre. Watergate, by the way, symbolism for the flood in the Bible, of course, which began on the date 217, which hints at the two planes that struck 17 minutes apart. Okay, now here's some confirmations, right? I'm just going to go through some connections to confirm all of this. But the Saturday Night Massacre was when Nixon tried to get the guy at the DOJ fired who was refusing to play down the Nixon tapes, if I have that correctly. And the head of the DOJ wouldn't follow along, so he resigned, and then the deputy head resigned, and then some other guy finally, did what Nixon asked, but then by then it was already too late, and the Congress got really motivated to really follow through on the scandal, and that was the end of Nixon. So it was the turning point in the Watergate scandal, this Saturday Night Massacre, when these employees were fired, which is why they're calling this the Friday Night Massacre, when the 1,000 employees were fired, right? And it was during the night. Why was it during the night? Because God designed it that way. It was at night on Friday. Well, also probably because they wanted to avoid some publicity, I suppose. But still, it's because of the Saturday Night Massacre. Now, so the date of this Saturday Night Massacre was October 20th, 73. Immediately, it became clear to me upon learning the date that this was going to connect to a lot of things because it was the 20th of the month. So let me explain why that's important. It's the 20th of the month. And so, for example, we have exactly 221 plus 221 plus 221 months to the date that the Antichrist was inaugurated. The sum of the divisors of 221 is 252, which hints at 2,520, the number that symbolizes the period of the end times and the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. This is also exactly 663 months. As I wrote, if this hints at 3 sixes. So that's, debatable. But I think it probably does. But anyway, October 20th, 73 was the 4 times 4th semi-prime number, which is 46, plus the 4 times 4th super semi-prime number. It's the 4 times 4th super semi-prime number. By the way, a semi-prime number is a number that is only divisible by 2 other prime numbers, and God uses this in his science. And so, it is the 4 times 4th super semi-prime number plus, and God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning in his science. Okay. What are we hinting at? Of course, the 44th president. That's why the Saturday Night Massacre was exactly the 4 times 4th super semi-prime number plus the 4 times 4th super semi-prime number plus the 4 times 4th super semi-prime number of months before the inauguration of the 44th president, who will be leading a massacre of Americans in a genocide perpetrated upon true conservatives and true Christians. That is what's coming. Believe it or not. For those who are wise, it is believable. For those who are unwise, they can't fathom such a thing. But if you are paying attention and you know the true spirit of the left today, this is exactly what is coming. In fact, if you go online, you can find the 10 stages of genocide list, and you can clearly see we are past the middle stages currently in America of a genocide. And that's what was going on during the CVD disease years. the so-called PAN and the Demic, which wasn't really. It was a cult, the cult of the left, in their ever increasing genocide, in their developing of a genocide. But it's all orchestrated by Satan. They don't know that they're being used by Satan, or that they are in even spiritual alignment with Satan, because they don't have a biblical worldview. They don't understand. And the understanding they do have about Christianity is wrong. They just have these mainstream ideas about Christianity, which unfortunately are even furthered by many quote-unquote Christians. But you are either in line with Satan or you're in line with Christ. There's no middle ground. And no, not all children, not all people, not all human beings are God's children. That's not the Bible. Many of them are children of Satan until they are adopted into God's family. They aren't born into God's family, which is why there is death. If they were born into God's family, there wouldn't even be death. We would just be born into heaven. I mean, why do we die? Why didn't God just create heaven and put us in it? Why do we have to go through a life and then die if supposedly we're all going to heaven, etc.? Well, what's the point of having to die? What's the point of pain even? Well, the problem is we can't get to heaven in our current condition. If we could, and everyone did go to heaven, heaven wouldn't be heaven. Because what makes this place hell is the people. And why is that? Well, because everyone is a fallen, unrighteous sinner. But this is by God's design, so that we can choose. Because God desired to create a creature to have a relationship with it, but that to have this relationship, the creature has to choose him. Because, for example, no one would want to marry a robot, someone who was forced to love them. Well, why would it be any different for God? So God didn't just create the being and then stand in front of it and say, hey, welcome to life. I'm God, love me. In order for God to give the creature an opportunity to choose, it was necessary that he would partially hide himself. I mean, this is so obvious, right? But you know, when I explain this to people, sometimes the light bulbs go on and they're like, oh, well, why is that even the case? I mean, how can it be that you're an adult and you've never thought about this? It's so basic, it's so obvious that if God was to have something as simple as a creature that would love him, that this would be how it would be. It would necessarily have to be this way. But this life, which is just long enough to make a decision regarding God, requires God partially hiding himself to give the opportunity for the creature to make this decision and not just be forced to love him. And so, in this environment, we are also placed in a world or environment of righteousness and unrighteousness in order to contrast between the two and either, choose God and his righteous ways or not. But to choose his ways requires humility because we've all transgressed his ways. Anyway, because God is good, these sins must be paid for. You can't go to a judge and say, yeah, I committed that crime, it's true, but I did all of these other things that were good. Please let me go. Well, if the judge did that, the judge would be corrupt because justice needs to be served for that judge to not be corrupt and to be a good judge. And so the wages of sin is death. one cannot go to heaven as they are. They must die. But sin needs to be paid for. Otherwise, God isn't good. There needs to be justice. This sin will be paid for in hell. These people that sinned, which is everyone, there are two types of people, the unrighteous and the self-righteous. Everyone is a sinner. So anyway, these sins must be paid for. And by the way, the righteous, the so-called righteous, the self-righteous people, the self-righteous camp, they are far more unrighteous than they realize. For example, if they've ever voted for the Democrat Party, just for example. I mean, people that don't think about these things don't recognize how sinful they are. They're extremely sinful. It's not just like they've done a couple minor things in their life, but they don't know it. Well, anyway, and then after they've paid for that sin, after they've been tortured by demons in hell, or whatever form of punishment it is, because it's relevant and different for every individual, then they die the second death, as it says in the Bible, contrary to what many Christians will tell people, that there'll be people that will be tortured forever in hell. Well, that's absurd, and the non-Christian that rejects the idea about the God of the Bible based on this, because of a Christian telling them that, are right, they are correct, but they are incorrect to have believed that Christian in the first place and not sought out the answer on their own, or look to other Christians to tell them otherwise. And so they're not guiltless. They're not innocent. They should have looked into it. Well, anyway, yes, no, it's absurd, and God wouldn't be a good God if he tortured people in hell forever. There is a second death, where then that soul will cease to exist. But there's also three camps, contrary to what other Christians will say. There being only two camps. No, there is a second one, and the majority of people are in the second camp. These people will be going to hell, and like I said, not every level of hell is the same as everyone else's, but they will be going to Sheol, an uncomfortable place, at the minimum, where they will receive a second opportunity to receive Christ in the gospel, as it says in the Bible. And this would apply to, for example, people that were perhaps born before Christ, or people in nations today, like Thailand, where they've barely received any news about the gospel. They barely, have any understanding, right? But beware, if you are a person from a Western nation and you know fully and have had many opportunities to receive Christ, don't count on a second chance, is my warning for you. Now, we need to move on here. Oh, and how is death conquered? Because the problem is death, because the wages of sin is death. But God is merciful, and so he doesn't want us to go to hell, but it's necessary as part of his plan to create a creature that would love him, right? You see how hell is necessary because of the first desire of God to create a creature that would love him? Unfortunately, it's necessary for people to go to hell because of that. But God doesn't want them to go to hell, but they have to. So there needed to be a solution. Death needed to be conquered. And it had to be a man. God couldn't just snap his fingers and say, let's do away with death. There needs to be a first immortal man, but a man couldn't do it. God needed to do it. So it was appropriate that God became a man and then died, and then conquered death through his resurrection, so that those who are willing to follow him will be forgiven through his Spirit, be transformed through his Holy Spirit, through Christ's Spirit, and have their bodies resurrected also, as that Spirit takes the material matter of their former body and resurrects it. into into their new spiritual resurrected bodies. They're not just ghosts in heaven, by the way. People will have bodies, but a much upgraded form of body, an immortal body. And speaking of immortality, immortality is a huge responsibility, which is why people can't be immortal without repenting. Because to become immortal is to be like God. I mean, you have to really be wanting to get rid of one's sin. You have to really be proving yourself, not through works, but what I mean is like demonstrating that you are very contrite about sin. Because once you're given the responsibility of immortality, you have a responsibility to keep heaven a heavenly place. Because it's sin that makes this world not heaven. So, but back to what I was saying here. So we had this connection. We also had the massacre, the Saturday Night Live, the Saturday Night Massacre to the inauguration. Okay, now there's this one too. The Saturday Night Massacre was 25 years and 6 months to the Columbine mass shooting massacre. The first, God uses first, the first mass school shooting and the shootings that was in the Four Corners state that has four corners that caused 4 times 4 deaths. Now, 25 years and 6 months hints at 256, which is 4 to the power of 4. 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. This is also exactly 306 months, which again hints at 3 6s. Now, the Columbine massacre was exactly 117 months before Obama's inauguration. And that's relevant because 117 is the equivalent in Hebrew gematria of the phrase in Hebrew in Genesis chapter 1, let it divide. The dividing chapter of the Bible is Psalms 117. The dividing year of the Roman Empire, which is symbolism for the Antichrist system because it's a child of the Roman Empire and the seat of the Antichrist is Rome. The maximum expansion year of the Roman Empire was 117 AD before it then began contracting. It's the dividing year. The Great American Eclipse that divided America peaked in the middle of America, another division, at 1:17 p.m. over St. Louis, which is symbolic of the gateway arch, which is symbolic of a door and the portal through which the demons will cross through. And, well, okay. And the door again is symbolized by the number 4. So we had the Columbine shooting in the Four Corner state that has 4 corners. It caused 4 times 4 deaths. Anyway, next one. The Columbine massacre was the 110th day of the year. It was 4 times 4 deaths in the Four Corners state with 4 corners. And this massacre, the Columbine massacre, was exactly 119 plus 119 plus 119 months to the predicted inauguration of Michelle Obama and Barack Obama as president and vice president on January 20th, 2029. This obviously hints at 9/11 and Revelation 9/11 also, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. This is also 357 months, which is a hint at 444 and the 44th president, because 357th composite number is 444. In other words, non-prime numbers. And again, it connects from the 4 times 4 deaths and the Four Corners state with 4 corners. This is amazing, this connection here too. Okay, so we have, in other words, the Saturday Night Massacre connecting with the Columbine Massacre right? With the fours, with the 25 years, 6 months, which is 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. And then the Columbine massacre in turn connects with 357 months, which is the 444th composite. With 357th, the composite is 444. And it's the four-corner state with 4 corners, the 4 times 4 deaths. Okay, you get the idea here. And it's the 44th president we are talking about. Now another one. January 20th, the inauguration of the president in 2009 was exactly 42 months before this other massacre in the four-corner state with 4 corners. The Dark Knight Rises movie massacre, the Batman movie on July 20th, 2012. And that in turn is 66 plus 66 plus 66 months to the inauguration, or the predicted inauguration of Michelle and Barack Obama as the president and vice president in January of 2029. This is a typo. Okay, this is obviously a typo. Now, 66 is also 3 times 22, so this gives us 3 sets of 322, or 3 times 22, which, as I explained earlier, is symbolic of Genesis 3:22, the lie at the beginning of the age that will also be the same lie at the end of the age that Barack Obama will preside over as the Antichrist, which is the promise of immortality through taking this transhumanism technology. Now, the January 20th Watergate turning point in 73 was exactly the 7 times 11th prime number of months to the Batman movie massacre, which again is 66 plus 66 plus 66 months before January 20th, 2029. But 7 times 11 hints at Genesis 7:11, which is the passage in which the flood began, which is why the Watergate flood turning point. Okay, the flood was the turning point in the ancient world, and so the Watergate turning point connects with the 7 times 11th prime number of months. Okay? Now, January 20th, 1973, the Saturday Night Massacre is 2 times 2600% of a year before the Friday Night Massacre on October 10th, 2025, when the CDC fired the 1,000 employees. And that in turn is 328.22% of a year to the predicted inauguration of Michelle Obama and Barack Obama as the president and vice president and antichrists. Or, well, Barack Obama the antichrist. The reason for 328.22% is because of Daniel 3:28, which is the verse, the passage that symbolizes the mark of the beast, the mark of the Antichrist. When they are compelled to bow to the statue when the music plays. Music is frequencies. The mark of the Antichrist inside people will be triggered by frequencies which will facilitate demonic possession in their brains. The mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by the number 22, and so that's why they point 22 in this number here. The inverse of the mark of the Antichrist would have been a Tav mark in Ezekiel chapter 9, and Tav is the last and 22nd letter in the alphabet, Hebrew alphabet. And the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, the 22nd out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. And the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's chromosomes, and a chromosome comes with 2 arms, and they come in pairs, as in 2 and 2. The 3-28 Super Bowl on February 5th, 2017, when the Patriots came back from a deficit of 3-28, which is why it's nicknamed the 3-28 Super Bowl, which hints at Daniel 3:28, is 3,170 days, which is the 66th prime number, which is the 3 times 22 prime number, before the Friday Night Massacre, which again is 328% of a year to January 20th, 2029. Okay, and it's the comeback Super Bowl, and January 20th, 2029 will be the big comeback of Barack Obama to the White House. So again, the 328 Super Bowl connects to Barack Obama's comeback with 328% of a year. Tony Hawk's 900 trick skateboard sold 6 plus 6 plus 6 days before the death of Diane Keaton. Tony Hawk's 900 trick at the X Games in 99 was 666 days after the death of Princess Diana. Diane Keaton, Princess Diana. Okay, and 666 both ways. Again, the skateboard sold 6 plus 6 plus 6 days before the death of Diane Keaton, and the trick that the skateboard was used in was 666 days after the death of Princess Diana. The paparazzi watched Diana like a hawk. And again, Keaton means Hawk's place, and Tony Hawk, of course, is Hawk. But Diana was known for having been watched by the paparazzi like a hawk, which is why she died, ultimately. Diane Keaton was known for her fashion and style, same as Princess Diana. Quote, Keaton cultivated an individual approach to androgynous dressing that resonated with women around the world, unquote. So she really was famous for her style and dress, as was Princess Diana, as in Diane Keaton. So we've established, anyway, the connection from Diane Keaton to Princess Diana. Princess Diana died in a crash at the Seine-Paris River Bridge. Michelle Obama was on the Seine River when the Notre Dame Cathedral burned for 9 hours, which is a hint at the 900 trick skateboard. 9 being the number of judgment in the Bible, the most important number in God's signs. That is only being explained on this channel, is true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. So, if you didn't know this, Michelle Obama was promoting her autobiography. What's it called? Becoming, the title of the book, Becoming. At the very time that the Notre Dame Cathedral was burning. In fact, there's a famous image of her sipping a wine glass on the roof of the boat on the river. And in the reflection of her wine glass, you can see the cathedral burning. This is a huge sign, of course. Not only that, but it's the Notre Dame. It's in like a woman, Our Lady. It's a hint at Michelle Obama, the future Queen of America. Okay, now, this day that she was on the river when the cathedral burned, and by the way, her boat had to be redirected because of the burning of the cathedral. And why was she promoting her book Becoming? Because she will become the queen. Our Lady of America. Okay? It's huge. It's so huge. By the way, the date of this was known ahead of time too, because it was April 15th, 2019. And it was recognized ahead of time that God was pointing to this date because it was Nisan 10, I believe, in the Hebrew calendar, which is the first day of the second month. The 10th day of the first month, which hints at 110, hints at 11, 110 and 11. And that pairs the 9 hours, which hints at Revelation 9:11. It's amazing. Actually, to be honest, that just came to me right now. I didn't realize, after all these years, I didn't realize that until just now. The 9 hours paired at the date to confirm the matter, because this is how God's signs, big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, and this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9 and 11. Now, the day that Michelle Obama was on the Paris River, when the cathedral, the Our Lady Cathedral burned, it was 3,666 days after she faux pas hugged the Queen of England. I'm going to pause right here. First of all, one of the most famous Beatles songs in history is Michelle. Paul McCartney sang the song Michelle to Michelle Obama at the White House and said at the time that he'd always looked forward to doing that. Now, the inspiration for the song Michelle came when Paul McCartney, before the Beatles, was hanging out at the Seine River in Paris. That's when he made the song, Michelle. Okay, you get it? Do you get that? Michelle Obama, the song Michelle, Seine River, she was on the Seine. We're talking about Princess Diana dying on the bridge of the Seine River. Now, the thing is, we're tying to the song Michelle now, actually. This is huge, right? The Beatles, the biggest band in history, also identifies the Antichrist through Michelle. There's more to that, by the way, lots more. The day that he sang at the White House, Michelle, and all that, which I don't have time to get into right now. But Paul McCartney's from England. And we're talking about the Queen of England and the faux pas hug that she did exactly 3,666 days before she was on the Seine River. And McCartney was knighted by the Queen, by the way. That's relevant. Now, it was 6 times 6 times 6 weeks when she, the burning, and she was on the Seine River, was also 6 times 6 times 6 weeks. By the way, this obviously hints at 666, the Antichrist, the King Antichrist, which is why the Queen symbolism here. And because she will become the Queen and then make Barack Obama the King Antichrist. Well, anyway, the Our Lady Church burned, and she was on the river where it burned 6 times 6 times 6 weeks exactly before the Encore plane crash over Washington, D.C., on the day that Michael J. Fox crashed onto the couch at the Back to the Future fan panel at the convention. This plane, it was owned by a company named Encore that had departed the 4 times 4th state and then crashed because the pilot became unconscious because he had taken the SHOT, became conscious and flew over the restricted airspace over Washington, D.C., which caused the jets to scramble and cause a sonic boom, etc. This plane was owned by a company named Encore, which pointed to, obviously, the Encore presidency of Barack Obama through Michelle Obama, which is why Michael, because Michael is the masculine of Michelle. And Barack has accidentally called Michelle Michael in the past. MJ is equal to 23 in gematria, and Barack Obama is the basketball president who wore jersey number 23, and the mark of the Antichrist changes a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes, and the name Fox hints at 666, which is the number that symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. F is the 6th letter, O is the 15th, and 1 plus 5 equals 6, and X is the 24th letter, and 2 plus 4 equals 6, which is why God is using the name Fox to symbolize 666 in his signs. And so Fox crashed. Michael J. Fox crashed on the day of the Encore plane crash. And there's more to this because the burning of the cathedral with Michelle Obama was exactly 1,260 days after the Kansas City Royals won the World Series, at the time that the movie The Walk was released by director Robert Zemeckis, who also directed Back to the Future. And the movie Back to the Future is about walking involves a wire, and The Walk is a movie about a true story about the walk, a tightrope walk across the Twin Towers. Okay, anyway, the Royals won the World Series at that time exactly 30 years after the only other time they won the World Series. In the Bible, 30 years is symbolic of a king. The name Royals is obviously a king symbolism. It's amazing they won World Series 30 years apart. And that 30 years happens to be the exact 30 years in the movie Back to the Future, when they go from 1985 to 2015, the years that the Royals won the World Series. The thing is, the movie predicted that the Cubs would win the World Series, and the Cubs almost went to the World Series in 2015, but then they went in 2016 and won the World Series for the first time in like 108 years. And the reason why that was in the movie Back to the Future is because it was a joke, because the Cubs are always never winning the World Series. And anyway, all of that is part of the Notre Dame, Our Lady, Queen connections here, okay? And so now, Back to the Future, I explained how that's relevant, that he crashed onto the couch on the day of the Encore plane crash. Encore is French for a repeat, right? And that rhymes with the faux pas hug she gave to the Queen. And where was she? On the French River. Okay. Now, Princess Diana's crash at the Seine River on August 31st, 1997 is 2,106th semi-prime number of days to the day that Michelle Obama was at the Our Lady fire on the Seine River. 2,106 hints at 216, which is 6 times 6 times 6. Barack Obama was born on the 216th day of the calendar year. Okay? Now, the fire and Michelle on the Seine River, again, was exactly 216 or 6 times 6 times 6 weeks before the Encore plane crash with Fox, which ends at 666, on the couch crash. And that day was 6 plus 6 plus 6 days before June 22nd, 2023, when the Titanic, the remains of the exploded Titanic or imploded Titanic were found. And this was shortly after the newly released Titanic images, which showed for the first time the giant serial number on the propeller, 101, because there was 101 passengers on the Mayflower that also crossed the Atlantic in their maiden voyage. The Titanic was a maiden voyage, serial number 101, because of the Mayflower maiden voyage with 101 passengers. And when the remains were discovered, 9 rescue ships were disbanded 900 miles off Cape Cod, which hints at the 101, which hints at 11, a pairing of 9 and 11. Okay? And again, it was the 11th triangular number of days. And the Mayflower landed on the date 11/11. Okay? And the Israelites, and their crossing of the Atlantic was analogous in their minds to the crossing of the Jordan River after the Israelites escaped the persecution in Egypt after 400 years. And then the 11 spies gave the bad report. But anyway, the ships were disbanded. The 9 ships were disbanded 900 miles off Cape Cod, exactly 400 days before the prophetic opening ceremony parade at the Paris Olympics on July 26, 2024, which was Antichrist because of the scene involving the Last Supper, etc., as you well know. And there are many things about that was very Antichrist. But that's why it was exactly 400 days, because that hints at the king of Egypt that persecuted the Israelites for 400 years. And the king of Egypt in the Bible is symbolic of the Antichrist. Okay, now the Paris River sign, which, by the way, was led by player number 23 for the Los Angeles basketball team, LeBron James. Los Angeles since fallen angels, and 23 is the number of the Antichrist who played basketball and wore jersey 23. Well, anyway, the Paris parade was 1,639 days to the predicted day that the basketball president will return to the White House. 1,639, the sum of the divisors is 600 plus 600 plus 600, which confirms everything because of all these other 666s that I've explained. 1,639 is also the 144th superprime number, semi-prime number. And the number 144 in Bible prophecy is symbolic of those who will be raptured, which is the symbolism in the parade, the victory parade, etc., on the Seine River, which is why the connection from the Seine River involving this 144 number. Okay. Now, the Seine River burn of the Our Lady Cathedral, and when Michelle was on the river, sipping the wine glass, consuming the burning in a way, mystically consuming the fire when she was drinking the wine. Okay? Anyway, that day, it was, like I just said, 1,260 days after the Royals won the World Series, which is 30 years after the other World Series win, which pointed to the movie Back to the Future, as I just explained. And now, also this day, like I just said, was 3,666 days after Michelle faux hugged the Queen, okay, and that was 3,000 days exactly after the El Salvador earthquake. It was 3,000 souls that perished after their rebellion at Mount Sinai in the book of Exodus. And that's all relevant here because of the symbolism in crossing the river, the Jordan River, which is why it ties to the Mayflower crossing and the Titanic, which was all symbolic of crossing the river. I forgot to mention that. Well, actually, because it just occurred to me just now. But the Seine River sign here that connects to the Titanic is because the Pilgrims saw their crossing as analogous to the crossing of the river. Wow. That just came to me just now. Whew, wow. Okay. Which is why the Exodus connection here is also relevant. But now, what's important about this El Salvador earthquake? Well, El Salvador is Spanish for the Savior. The territory of El Salvador is almost the exact same size as the territory of Israel. And Jesus said to watch for earthquake signs regarding the timing of his return. So why this earthquake in El Salvador? Well, let me just explain. This was a diagram that has been in the works for many years, since at least 2019. And this particular diagram was produced in 2023. So this is an old diagram, okay? But here you can see this Notre Dame Our Lady burning Michelle Obama day was exactly 6,666 days after this El Salvador earthquake. Now, why was this El Salvador earthquake important? Well, it was exactly 1 month to this other El Salvador earthquake. The two earthquakes with their mudslides killed 1,259 people, which is one person shy of exactly 1,260, which is this number that's repeated 7 times in Bible prophecy that symbolizes the period of the Antichrist, which is also, by the way, exactly 60 plus 60 plus 60 weeks, which is 666. Okay, and the one missing death here, I believe, is Trump. Because Jericho, the walls of security of Jericho collapsed after the Israelites blew trumpets. And archaeology proves that the walls collapsed due to an earthquake. And there's 3 sets of 7. The Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7. They marched around the walls of Jericho once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. It was a 3 sets of 7. And again, Trump was inaugurated in the year 7, ending in 7, when he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. He was a trumpet. And what was he known for? His first presidency and election campaign? His border wall of security, which collapsed after he left office. He was trumpeting. He was trumpeting the collapse of America's security. But really, America's spiritual security from God. Not just the southern border wall of security. That's all symbolism. But this earthquake, anyway, was 70 plus 70 plus 70 days before 9/11. And on 9/11, 7 times 7 times 7 people were killed. I'm sorry. As of the prophetic sign in September of 2023, 7 times 7 times 7 firemen were killed. And that was the news on that date. It was a big day. It was a big sign. It was a big story at the time. But it's amazing. No one knew that it was 7 times 7 times 7. But there was a fireman that finally died from the effects of the smoke at Ground Zero. And so he was the 7 times 7 times 7th fireman. Okay, so I don't know if that's still the number, but it could very well be. Anyway, 56 passengers on the second flight, and that's 7 plus 7 times 7. And that's what the 3 sets of 7 was at Jericho. 7 days and then 7 times 7 on the 7th day. And Joshua, who led the Israelites, died at 110. It was 110 stories on 9/11. And so that's why it connects to this earthquake, right? Because also the towers that were 110 stories engendered an earthquake and cracked the foundation of Federal Hall. Anyway, the 1 month is also symbolic of the one missing death here. So it's, in other words, predicting Trump's death. Okay, ultimately. And 6,666 days, which is broken up into 3,000 days and 3,666 days, as I mentioned, with the Queen's hug of Michelle Obama on April 1st. This diagram doesn't show that. Okay. But back to the Back to the Future thing here. The movie Back to the Future was released 4 times 4 weeks and 4 days before the Royals won the World Series. You know what? I don't even remember why that's relevant. Sorry. Okay, so that's enough here, though. You get it here. We have the 6 times 6 times 6 weeks here to the Encore plane crash and the crash of Michael J. Fox, 666. And the 6 plus 6 plus 6 days to the Titanic, which, as I have explained now, connects to a parade on the river, the Seine River. The Titanic was crossing the Atlantic, which was like the Jordan River. 400 days because of Egypt and the Israelites crossing the Jordan River. To the Seine River parade in the Olympics, which was Antichrist, which, as I explained, connects with the 144th super semi-prime number, to the return of the Encore and the arrival of the Queen of America, which why it connects to the Queen faux pas hug, to the Encore plane crash. It's amazing. The part of the 4 times 4th state, the 44th president. But again, also this connects to Diana, Princess Diana's crash, because of this number that hints at 216, 6 times 6 times 6, semi-prime number of days, to Michelle Obama at the river. Okay? The reason for October 11th, 2025, Diane Keaton hinting at Princess Diana is because October 11th, 2025 is the 6 plus 6 plus 6th triangular number of weeks before the return of Michelle Obama, or the Queen of America, on January 20th, 2029. Princess Diana, right? Queen of America, with the 6 plus 6 plus 6th triangular number. That's why God used Diane Keaton to hint at Princess Diana. It facilitated all of these other connections, including, the Hawk, because again, Tony Hawk did his trick 666 days after Princess Diana's crash, and stuff like that. It's all about the mark of the Antichrist as well. And the Falconer, RFK Jr., etc., because the skateboard sold 6 plus 6 plus 6 days before the death of Diane Keaton, whose name means Hawk's place, etc. Okay? But the timing of Keaton's death points to Queen or Princess Michelle Obama, because her death is 6 plus 6 plus 6th triangular number of weeks before January 20th, 2029. Amazing. And again, Keaton's death was 6 plus 6 plus 6 days after Hawk's skateboard sold, and Hawk did his trick 666 days after the death of Princess Diana. Okay. Tony Hawk's 900 trick skateboard sold 6 plus 6. I think I'm just repeating myself here. And again, Keaton and Diana were known for their style and all that too. So and Diana was watched like a hawk. Keaton means hawk. We did all this already. Okay. So we're almost to the end here. January 20th, 2029 is 18 plus 8% of a year, which hints at H188, whoa, exclamation mark, which is also 3 months and 6 days, which hints at 3 6s and 666, which is also 96 days, which hints at 6 divided by 9 equals 0.666, before the predicted resurrection of Pope Francis on April 26th, 2029. And he will be promoting the mark of the Antichrist, which will make people immortal. And so, anyway, that just all ties to the RFK Jr. sign, I guess, with the Saturday Night Massacre, Friday Night Massacre connections. Diane Keaton, well, Francis will also be a king, an Antichrist king. And so Michelle Obama will be the queen, and that's, anyway. Now, Diane Keaton starred in The Young Pope. Oh, this is why it's relevant. Because Diana Keaton's death connects to Michelle Obama at the White House on this day, which in turn connects to the Pope. But Diane Keaton starred in The Young Pope, which was this miniseries with Jude Law, aired on HBO, all right? And Daniel chapter 7, quote, he will think to change the times and the law, unquote. Or maybe it's a paraphrase. But it was released, the show, on HBO on October 21st, 2016. 3,277 days before Keaton's death on October 11th. 3,277 is the 923rd semi-prime number, which is symbolism for the mark and Barack Obama. Barack Obama is the basketball president who was inaugurated in 2009, and the mark of the Antichrist, the inverse of it, is described in the 9th chapter of Ezekiel, and it alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes. 3,277 is also the 88th super semi-prime number. Pope Francis died at the age of 88. Wait a second. Well, anyway, he'll be resurrected. When he is resurrected, he will be a young pope because he will be resurrected. And I assume it won't be in an 88-year-old body. And this, by the way, fits the Nostradamus prophecy about this pope being a young pope and black. He was the first Jesuit pope. Jesuits are known for their black garb. Anyway, that's another subject. But he is the young pope, or he will be, and because he'll be resurrected. But we have this number that's the 88th semi-prime number, and he died at the age of 88. And this connects, this 88th number and this 923 number connects to the young pope airing on October 21st. To Diane Keaton's death, and she starred in The Young Pope. This is huge, okay? This is clearly designed by God to point to the young pope and to point to Pope Francis. And again, Keaton's death does connect profoundly with 6 plus 6 plus 6th triangular number of weeks to Michelle Obama, the queen, which then, as I just explained, 3 months and 6 days, which is also 666, to the predicted resurrection of Pope Francis. Okay, I just paused my recording at 6 minutes and 6 seconds. But anyway, when I said, whoa, I mean, wait a second, a minute ago, I forgot or didn't realize that the Young Pope series was aired on the 21st of a month. And of course, Pope Francis died on the 21st of April this year. So I just did the math, and it's astounding beyond words here. So, it's correct. It does connect. It's an exact 102 months, but 102, the sum of the divisors of 102 is equal to 216, which is 6 times 6 times 6. Yes. Okay, so it also, by the way, connects with 12 years and 6 months, which since at 1,260, the number that symbolizes the period of the Antichrist, 1,260 days, 12 years and 6 months also hints at that. Exactly 12 months and 6 years after this will be April 21st, 2029, which is predicted to be an important date. Now, I think the Pope will be resurrected 5 days after that, and that the anniversary of his death will be a prophetic sign related to his resurrection 5 days later, but I could be wrong, and he could be resurrected on the exact fourth anniversary of his death. Yeah. Also, it's exactly 150 months, and 15 is the 6th semi-prime number. Anyway, but anyway, the point is that the day that he died for sure connects. Well, as does the other connection. The other connection is also for sure, but we just don't know what will happen on April 21st, 2029. But we do know he died on April 21st, 2025, which hints at the number 216, connecting to the young Pope. It's so amazing. If you doubted that, my prediction here that the Pope will be resurrected, thinking that it's a little crazy, this probably should change your mind. Why else does the young Pope connect? And we're talking about Diane Keaton here in her death, connecting to this. Okay, the Pope is predicted to be resurrected on this date, 3 months and 6 days, which is a 666 after Michelle Queen Obama, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6th triangular number of weeks after the death of Diane Keaton, who starred in the young Pope. But we also have the young Pope connecting also itself. It connects to Diane Keaton's death, as I explained, with the 88 number, and Pope Francis died at 88. But he died with this number that hints at 666 after the airing of the young Pope. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus, do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, "Jesus loves you," unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.